Welcome, everyone. My name is Tejendra Ferali, and I'm the chair of the UCL ERIC Seminar Series. I'm professor at University College London and also co-research director for the ERIC program. This seminar series is part of the ERIC research program, but this event particularly is going to focus on educational provisions in diverse refugee contexts. We've done a number of sessions in the past looking at a number of issues and topics, but this will particularly focus on the educational difficulties in refugee situation. And in that process, what we are hoping to do is to bring um, ERIC research into dialogue with other scholarly work that some of the presenters here today will be sharing with us. And the idea is to engage more critically with the methodological issues, ethical dimensions, as well as some critical reflections on the findings that we will be sharing today, which is the focus of the UCL ERIC seminar series. Um, the plan for the session today is that Dr. Vanessa Ozawa will begin with her presentation on the case of Rohingya refugee education in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh. And then I will hand over, Vanessa will hand over to Dr. Brian Lally and his team, should I say, to present their work. I just wanted to, and then at the end, I think we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. So I've asked our presenters to limit their talk within 10 to 12 minutes. We're going to be very strict with time. And you may want to refer back to your presentation later on when we are having sort of Q&A. So please do stick to time when you're presenting. Let me very quickly introduce our panel. First of all, Dr. Vanessa Ozawa is an education researcher at the International Rescue Committee and honorary research fellow at UCL IOE. Vanessa is working on the ERIC program with a focus on gender, inclusivity, social justice, and peace building. And then we've got Professor Eleanor Hargreaves, a colleague of mine at UCL. Eleanor is Professor of Learning and Pedagogy at UCL Institute of Education, and her work focuses on social justice and how or whether children globally in primary schools experience social justice in schooling. Then Dr. Brian Lally, who's an educational consultant. And Brian works in various conflict affected and contexts of mass displacement as an educator, as a researcher, and has extensive experience in teaching, teacher professional development, educational leadership, child protection, and as sort of as a trainer for teachers and school leaders. Then finally, Dr. Zumana Al-Waeli is a researcher, educator, and trainer, and her work focuses on education, the sociology of education, and the political economy of education in conflict-affected and resettlement contexts. I just want to sort of set the scene in literally 1 minute about what we are talking about today before I hand over to Vanessa. As we know that um, the refugee crisis globally has reached to an unprecedented level with almost 117 million people forcibly displaced. More than half of them are internally displaced people, and the refugees, combined with the ongoing, long-standing situation of Palestinians under the mandate of UNRWA constitute almost 47 million. There are 6.86 million asylum seekers, but then also there are other people who are in need of international protection. And 69% of refugees are hosted in the neighboring countries. When it comes to the question of education, almost 46% school-aged refugee children remain out of school. And as you would see, as they grow older and progress to the higher level of education, the likelihood of dropout increases quite significantly. If you are a refugee person, your chance of actually accessing university education is very minimal. As it stands, just about 9% refugees have access to tertiary education. What is the purpose of education for refugees? And there's a lot of discussion around this unknowable future for refugees, right? Our colleague Sarah Dryden Peterson has written quite extensively about this notion of refugees' future not being ensured, if you like, or not being clear. But for the purpose of education, it's hard. So it is hard to define what education is needed until we know what kind of society that we're going to create. So, in that regard, nevertheless, it's important to think about education not only in the immediate term, but also what it can create and what it can make people make things possible in the future. So, the reality of most refugees, as we see today, is that their life is stuck in pretty much in limbo. So, on the one hand, there are global frameworks that imagine refugees' integration in the host settings as a possibility, and therefore educational programs are advocated accordingly, whereas there are very little chances of integration into those settings. These four scenarios of life trajectories in refugee settings, are all kind of unclear, uncertain, and certainly not feasible for everybody. For example, return to the country of origin, even though it has happened in some contexts, is increasingly difficult because of the protracted nature of conflict and crisis. Resettlement, very unlikely. Less than 1% of refugees are resettled in the third country. And integration in the host community is highly political, as we know. But Sarah Dryden Peterson talks about this transnationalism as a sort of a new sort of dimension of refugees' life, where futures are not geographically constrained and they can be moving around. So, with this broader picture in mind, I want to now sort of dig deeper into the context of Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, where Dr. Vanessa Wazawa will talk about the politics of curricular provisions for Rohingyas in Cox's Bazar. So over to you, Vanessa.
Thank you very much, Tajendra. So let me share my screen. Right. Okay, so thank you very much again. So this work actually has been conducted with Tajendra and myself as part of the ERIC program.
Vanessa, could you do the
Yes.
slideshow, please? I think it's not coming.
From my side, it is. Does it come?
You can
No.
see it, but can you press present?
It is on my side, it's all let me stop sharing and then try it again.
Okay.
Um Let me see if it works this time.
Yes, perfect.
Is it good?
Yeah. Okay.
Right, lovely. Right, so yes, so this work has been conducted with Tejendra and myself as part of ERIC. So we particularly focus on the refugee context of Rohingya population. So Rohingya is let me. So Rohingya is originally from the Myanmar, the north part of Myanmar, named Rakhine State.
There's a string on my powder. What? Look, I need something to cut it up. Let me try that one. Can you pass me my bag? No, please. No. It was your fault that you left it there.
Sure. Can you mute the colleague? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
All right then. Okay, cool. Thank you. So Rohingya refugees are originally from Myanmar, Rakhine State in the south, the northern part of Myanmar. It is a Muslim, but also religious, ethnic, and a linguistic minority of Myanmar in a Buddhist majority country. And then they make the largest stateless and refugee on earth. And then despite the political discourses of Myanmar government for decades, framing them as illegal migrants, actually they've been living in Rakhine State for generations and generations. So they've been experiencing different waves of violence for decades, but actually at the time of independence of Myanmar in 1962, they were citizens of Myanmar. However, gradually through ultra-nationalistic Buddhist policies, they have become marginalized more and more. Ultimately, in 1982, they have become stateless when the citizenship was ripped off. From that moment, they be extremely marginalized and struggling to access different kinds of services, including education system. But as I said, they've been experiencing different waves of violence for decades. However, ultimately in 2017, the biggest violence happened against them, which made 700,000 Rohingya fleeing from Rakhine State, crossing the border to Cox's Bazar, as you can see on the map, where the largest refugee camps on earth exist today, where over 1.2 million Rohingya live there as of now. So in terms of the education provision for any refugees is highly complex and then contested, whether to provide, as Tajendra mentioned earlier, provide home country's national curriculum or the one from the host community. In case of Rohingya, actually, until quite recently, they were not accessing any national curriculum, but only since 2021. The rationale behind is that because one is Bangladesh is not the signatory of the 1951 Refugee Convention, but at the same time, a lost generation was emerging already. But it's also to note that the ultimate aspiration for the refugee for Rohingya refugee is to go back home and to have that experience the marginalization for decades. Sorry. It's very symbolic to access the Myanmar curriculum. The fact that accessing the national curriculum is is a prefigure of the belonging to the country of origin and then to get connected with that country. But however, it's quite ironic because they needed to wait to become stateless and in exile to access the national curriculum without fear. Also, because they have not had the proper access to the education or any kind of services back home, they do not speak Burmese, the national language, the language dominant in Myanmar. And then so the fact they're accessing national education of Myanmar, learning Burmese language is giving them a sense of hope for the future integration when they eventually go back home. So these are our research questions. So given the context, we are trying to understand how Rohingya and Myanmar represented in the textbooks of Myanmar curriculum, and then what actually are the sense of belongings to Myanmar among Rohingya refugee children, and then how do they understand, make sense of Rohingya communities, but also Myanmar, and then what are the implications of these aspects for longer, sustainable future equity, justice, and social cohesion through in education. So our studies is informed by social justice lens, but particularly drawing on the 4R conceptual framework by Novelli and colleagues. So actually, 4R envisions education to be fair and just for different social groups and for them to have equal and fair access to different resources and opportunities from the decision-making processes of education to the learning outcomes. Because in our study, we are looking at textbooks, we are trying to particularly focus on the dimensions of reconciliation, recognition. So 4Rs include redistribution, representation, recognition, and then reconciliation. So in terms of recognition, is to examine to what extent different social groups and their identities, values are represented, but also to what extent democratic values are represented in the text, in the textbooks and education discourses. And then in terms of reconciliation, to understand, to explore, examine to what extent the legacy of violence is addressed, but also to what extent education promotes trust to move forward peacefully. Then in terms of methods, first we analyze textbooks of the Myanmar curriculum from grade 1 to 5, focusing on 3 subjects: morality and civics, social studies, and then life skills. And then we apply critical discourse analysis, again informed by 4R framework. And then also we went to collect the data in the refugee camps last year, basically to understand their sense of belonging, how they perceive the community and then Myanmar. So we involved 65 learners from grade 5 and 7, girls and boys, and then we prompt 2 questions. One is asked to draw them what represents for them peoples of Myanmar, and a similar prompt, but this time to understand what represents in their view Rohingya people. So the first observation is that throughout the textbooks we analyze, there's a very explicit message of diversity, unity, and respect and empathy. And there's no othering discourses. Basically, often when you promote national images, we kind of draw the boundary with otherness. But there's there's absence of othering discourses. And then this message of unity and diversity was not only at the general level, but at the ethnic level as well. They acknowledge the ethnic diversity, and you can see, different ethnic groups in the picture through prompts, exercises, anecdotes, and then visuals. Here you can see hand in hand different ethnic groups together, and the unity is very much highlighted really explicitly. However, when we look at Rohingya, they are not quite, but completely absent from that diversity and national unity. So when they talk about national diversity and the differences and the respect and the cohesiveness, actually they're mainly represented through 8 dominant ethnic groups here: Kachin, Kaya, Kain, Chin, Bama, Mon, Rakhine, and Shan. And then there's absolutely no mention about Rohingya, even when they talk about Rakhine State, or sometimes talking about in a geography, the border sharing with Myanmar and Bangladesh, basically Cox's Bazar, but they don't mention at all about Rohingya. There's omission completely, the silence, which is null curriculum. So that sense of diversity and a national unity is very exclusive and does not apply to Rohingya at all. And because textbooks are a very powerful tool, it's a political artifact which constructs the ultimate official knowledge. And in that official knowledge production processes, Rohingya is marginalized, absent, and in a way, it's normalizing the violence against them. Another observation is the textbook quite feature a lot of images and stories around Buddhism and also Burmese ethnic group. You can see different pictures of pagoda, Buddhist temples, and national heroes. All of them are Burmese and then Buddhist. And then there's almost no mention about Islam or other religions. So there's no recognition of that aspects. But when we ask children to draw what represents for them Myanmar, many of them actually depicted pagodas and then Buddhism, which are which is in coherence with the textbooks. Something to highlight is that many of these children, they grew up in the camps and they were really never had experiences in Myanmar back home. So you can see these pagodas are very similar to the pictures featured in the textbook. So we can sense the influence of textbooks in constructing the worldview. Now, on the other hand, when we asked how they understand people, Rohingya people, many of children drew aspects related to Islam, as you can see here, mosque, madrasa, Quran, burqa. And so there's a clear distinction between identity markers of Myanmar, how they understand, and Rohingya people. There's a division of us and them. It's really important here because this aspect, this identity marker of Rohingya, which children drew, is completely absent from the textbook, but also it's one of the reasons why they've been persecuted. Another observation is textbook features, again, peace-promoting values. You can see pictures about equity, children's rights, national heroes promoting peace at the UN level. At the same time, they condemn explicitly violence, no killing, no bullying, and then we have to condemn these actions, which is signaling actually the lack of which is recognizing that peace is the national images of Myanmar. However, again, when we ask children to draw peoples of Rohingya people, some children actually drew Myanmar military violence against Rohingya community, which is actually consistent with the lack of reconciliation regarding the violence against Rohingya in the textbooks and how they understand, make the sense of Myanmar, which is actually signaling the negative coherence between textbooks and then their perception and the lived experiences. So throughout the textbooks analysis and different drawings I shared now, there are incoherences between the national images promoted throughout the textbooks and the lived realities of Rohingya children and communities. While textbooks, want to depict national images of Myanmar as peace-loving, actually drew the children's drawing show Rohingya people perceive Myanmar through violent military actions against their own communities. And then there is unaddressed grievances, obviously, as we could see here. Why textbooks ignore the violence against them, actually, children still carry that grievances and negative violence experiences. However, on a positive tone and a small glimpse of maybe positive hope is that a few children drew Myanmar flag and also portraying Burmese language or our country, basically using the pronoun our country, our flag, our language when it comes to Burmese language or Myanmar flag. So there's a hope, but still there's so much to do to achieve that picture on the long term. So as a conclusion, our study really shows education, while it's really important to provide education in an emergency context, it's important to look at beyond foundational skills, literacy, numeracy, because education shapes the official knowledge of the nation in the world. So this is a message that national curriculum is actually a political artifact. And also there's a disconnection, what they learn, these Rohingya refugee children in the refugee camps today, and then how they've been living the experiences in relation to Myanmar and then their own community. So education is a site of tension, but at the same time, it doesn't go without complexities, because actually the Myanmar government does not acknowledge them as citizens as of today. And then so the Myanmar curriculum, although it's been implemented in the camps, it's not accredited at all. I'm finishing, sorry. And then, so at the same time, the education provision is overseen by international actors, UNICEF, Save the Children, other organizations. So we don't have the official channel to communicate with the Myanmar government to address the gaps. And then these international agencies are not very much in response, they're not responsible for developing curriculum per se. And also actually the Myanmar curriculum, which we analyzed, was developed through the technical assistant of Japanese ODA JICA. So there's a whole complexities here. However, we want to provide some cautious ideas for way forward. One is, although the complexities to address the gaps in the existing Myanmar curriculum, it would be important to develop nonetheless supplementary materials to reflect the identities, values, history, and the cultural practices. And then to expand actually the teacher training beyond just inclusion in a more general manner, but to address identity erasing contents, which children are learning every day. And then to engaging with madrasa, which is very, very popular across the refugee camps in Cox's Bazar, to have the religious aspects and then key identity marker to nurture their identity. So yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Vanessa. That was very comprehensive. Now, can we move to Brian? Would you be able to share your PowerPoint, Brian? Perfect. Yeah.
Right, hopefully that is working for everyone. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Brian Lally. I am one of the team that worked on a number of locations for research that we brought together in a book which we published. So I'm going to talk about one of the sites.
Have we lost Brian? You are on mute, Eleanor, if you are saying something. Oh,
Yeah, I think we may have lost Brian Tejendra.
yes. Eleanor. Oh, we can't hear you, Eleanor. We did hear you well before. Um, okay. Can we?
You can hear me. If I speak really loud, does that help?
Eleanor, we're not able to hear you as loudly as we were able to before, so potentially if you could rejoin the meeting and see if that jogs the audio setting.
Okay. Come back. Yeah. Zumana, would you be able to take over? I've got the
Yeah,
PowerPoint. Yeah.
thank
Let
you.
me share
Brian is here.
Is Brian here?
Brian here.
I can see him. You're on mute.
Zoom is doing very strange things. My apologies, it completely kicked me out. Right,
Okay, I'm sharing your PowerPoint, Brian. Can you see?
yes, I can. Okay, so
Okay.
right, apologies. Shall I just pick up from where I was?
Yes, please. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so in this context of the 9 education centres which were located inside the informal settlements, sometimes known as camps, we were able to draw for a period of 3 days a group of 45 of the children from each of those schools, aged between 8 and 14 years old, to come together to share their ideas and insights. And we did this through a series of workshops that were constructed with Professor Eleanor, who you're going to hear from in a minute, and another team, a few other team members, and also working very, very closely with the organization on the ground. Part of this was built on the fact that I had been embedded with that organization for some time, so there were already foundational levels of trust, and that relationship, that foundational quality, was something that really facilitated the quality of the research that we were able to uncover. A similar theme that you'll hear from Jumana at the end of our presentation, talking about the second study that we did as part of this project, which was based in London. So across these days, the children were given lots of opportunities to share their ideas, both with their peers, but also with their teachers, and in a very broad range of methods, including drawing, making presentations, role plays, speeches, you name it, we did it. It was lots of ways to tease out what the children thought about the education that they were receiving, what they liked, what they didn't like, their general observations about that, how that fitted in with life. And one of the fascinating things that kept emerging time and time again was notions of belonging and identity and community that these children were experiencing. So our project was, if you could go to the next slide, please, Tejendra, drawing on 2 frameworks. Firstly, Nancy Fraser's concept of parity of participation as a means to social justice. And then secondly, if you look at the next slide, please, on Coley's conceptualization of safety, belonging, and success for displaced people. Jumana's going to tell us more about this later on, but those are the two theoretical prisms through which we were looking at what the children had to say. So if you, next slide, please. And as the children themselves put it, this is a quote from one of them, they were sharing their perspectives. And what we'd like to share with you today is just a small part of the research findings, but particularly relating to this notion of belonging and identity. So with that, over to Eleanor.
Thank you. So I would like to, can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Yes,
Yes,
okay,
we can.
great, that is great. Okay, so what I would like to do is share with you the voices of the children about what they felt they needed in school, which ended up being all about a sense of belonging. So here they represent love and friendship. Next, please. One of them said that she learned love and friendship, and I felt I was making my friends happy and they helped me. Next. They also said they wanted teachers to treat students fairly. Next. For example, one of them wrote to the teachers directly, I hope you treat students fairly, inside and outside the classroom. Next. And also the children admired and respected their teachers, and they felt that the teachers championed a sense of safety and belonging. Next. So one of them wrote, I learned that the teacher is an essential pillar of our lives, and without teachers, life is incomplete. Next. They wanted some fun in the classroom, and there you see these Syrian refugee children having fun in one classroom, but they wanted more fun. Next, please. So we asked them to write a letter to their actual teachers, and we obviously recorded the letters, and they said, dear teachers, please offer the students some fun in the classroom so they don't get fed up during the lesson. Next, please. But at the same time, although they had a sense of belonging within their school, in the MAP schools in the Beqaa Valley, they were all thinking about going back to Syria. They were very focused on that. And I'm interested in the idea of this potentially being a negative sense of coherence, as Vanessa was describing. So here they are thinking about the homes they left and what they had to put up with now. Next, please. And so they were saying to each other, we must help each other so all of us can rebuild our destroyed country, and in order to help others as well. I'm now going to hand over to Jumana, who's going to talk about these same Syrian refugee cohort, but those who made it to an English school. Jumana.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. So I'm going to discuss my research, which was conducted in an inner London school with 6 Syrian refugee students aged between 13 and 16 years. My research paints rather a grim picture, with belonging as a central component of the description of the children's experiences of education. So the research mainly asked about the experiences of education and the social experiences of schooling of those Syrian refugee students in their school in London. Belonging emerged as a central component of their experiences. However, what they have described was that they experienced a reduced sense of belonging in and through their school. Belonging through schooling, and I will start with what belonging emerged as in the research. Belonging through schooling was central to regaining a sense of home, according to the children, in their new resettlement context. And belonging did not emerge automatically, as they explained, but so you don't really experience belonging if you just get your access to school. Rather, it develops as a part of a broader lived social and educational experience in school. The children expressed that school is a very central site for rebuilding webs of belonging, particularly through sustainable structural strategies, pedagogies, and daily interactions and relationships. Belonging for the children was optimized through positive relationships then, meaningful recognition, adequate distribution, and fair representation. And as Brian explained, this was the framework that guided the study. So Nancy Fraser was, if you will, the guiding structure within which Colley's three trajectories are embedded. What the testimonies revealed in that regard is that being in a safe country does not automatically grant you a home or a sense of belonging. It is the start. However, belonging grows through the everyday interactions between the students, their teachers, their peers, the school staff, and the school structures. And so that's why they needed meaningful recognition, adequate distribution, and their voice to be heard in order for safety to be realized, for belonging to be built, and for success to ensue. If we could move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So just a quick look at the structural issues that were guiding the students' experiences. In the UK, all children have right to education between the ages of 5 to 16. However, the Syrian children's access to education was not even in practice. Some of them had to wait for 6 months. Some had to wait for over a year to access education. And this relates to when they arrived in the UK and how their asylum cases were handled and when they were granted their refugee status. Now, there were no dedicated national education policies at the time of my research for refugee students and for asylum-seeking students. And once they were admitted to school, the children were automatically placed in the English as an additional language unit in order to learn English, or were immediately put in the lower sets, the lower educational sets, as according to the experiences of the children. And the limited funding in schools meant limited support for refugee students who needed a lot of support, not just language, but many other aspects of learning and education. But why does it really matter? Why does school matter for their belonging and for their sense of home, or rebuilding sense of home in a new country? Because school is the very first place where they meet people. It's their gateway to integrating into the new communities they are now resettling into. And so belonging is extremely important for them, since they have lost their friends, their loved ones, their country, their homes, their ways of life as they know it. And now they're trying to resettle and get introduced to a new cultural and social milieu. If we could go to the next slide, please. Now, how did they experience belonging, or what were the factors or the trajectories that affected their belonging? The first was recognition. And recognition in this case was for their status, for their needs, and for their abilities, rather than their Syrian identity in particular. They wanted to feel as equal human peers to their friends. But what they have experienced was othering and stigma. So they were labeled almost always as the refugees, and also as troublesome children or violent children, aggressive children who are coming from war zones, children who are behaving in a violent way, etc. Their needs were dismissed or reduced to being traumatized. So whenever they had this specific education needs, they were labeled as, well, maybe they were traumatized, maybe they're still traumatized, rather than addressing these particular needs. Also, during the time of my research, I heard so many referring to them as they're different, they don't speak enough English, they behave differently, they have different cultural values, etc. Their different histories, their knowledge, prior knowledge, their capital, abilities, were often misrecognized or overlooked, and the school was stressing on them learning English and also getting integrated into the main curriculum, and that resulted in the lack of belonging.
Right.
Sorry, to the next slide. Okay. That's very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Distribution, material support, learning support, pedagogical support, they were mostly missing due to the lack of trained teachers. Power was used against them rather than with them, and lack of educational and digital material. They were distributed according to sets rather than to needs. And there were minimum or selective support. Third slide, please. At voice, which is very important, they were not allowed to share their voice in determining their learning or in sharing their concerns or experiences. Only in Refugee Week, they were supposed to speak about their journeys rather than anything else. And they were framed, the journeys were framed into thin stories, as Coley described them, where the school decides what the children would share. If we could move to the next slide. Finally, the final factor that they highlighted in shaping their belonging experience was what they called mahabba, which translates roughly to love, but it's not exactly love. The concept they have highlighted includes care, commitment, responsibility, respect, trust, and awareness. They wanted their teachers to build sustainable, structural, positive relationships with them, which makes them feel safe, develop trust, and have sustainable, good relationships with their school. On that, I end. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Zumana. So that's really interesting. So I think the presentations, even though two presentations, they actually brought together three different contexts where refugee learners were experiencing education. And what comes out as a sort of common theme in relation to how learners value their experiences is this idea of sense of belonging. Whether it is about returning home to Syria to rebuild the destroyed country, and that actually brings everybody together, or it is about trying to reestablish connection with the country that had denied them in the case of Rohingyas, or in the case of Syrian refugees in London, trying to assert their right to be treated fairly, as a sense of their presence as an equal level. All of these experiences basically reflect how children value who they are. So formation of their identity in wherever they are and where they relate themselves to is quite significant dimension. And I think I quite like the method that you used. Eleanor, you mentioned about asking students to write a letter to their teachers. I hadn't thought about that. I think that's a fantastic method to enable children to reflect on what their needs are and the kind of things that they may not have communicated with the teachers that they were able to express. And I think the study that Vanessa and I led, where the participatory visual method also allowed children to express what was happening, what was going on in their head. So we didn't ask them to depict their experiences of violence, but when they actually were asked to think about the peoples of Myanmar, some of the children actually conceptualized Myanmar as the military violence that their cultural community had experienced. So I think these creative methods, I think, enable children to sort of exercise their autonomy in relation to expressing their views. I think that we need that kind of sort of methods more and more in order to do research in these settings. But also, I think children's voice in refugee education is not very much prioritized in the research that I have personally seen. And I think we need to hear more children's voices. So I think all of these sort of findings that we've shared today, provide really kind of difficult learning environments, whether they are resourced environments like in the UK or the very under-resourced difficult environments. I think the quality of experience does not necessarily always depend on whether you have a school infrastructure or a teacher. So I think that's where in ERIC we have conceptualized quality of education in relation to the quality of experience that learners have in their schools, quality of materials, quality of teachers, the relationships, those kinds of things basically determine the quality. So thank you so much, all of you, for that. So we got about 15 minutes, and I would very much like other colleagues and participants to turn their camera on and ask their questions, or put their questions in the chat to the panel, whatever way it feels comfortable. But the idea is to share and reflect and learn from each other. Many people may have their own sort of experiences working in other settings. So over to the colleagues in the audience. I should be able to see any hands up.
There's a question from Ruth Naylor in the
Oh,
chat.
there you go. Okay, I hadn't clicked on that. Everyone signed. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Ruth. So in these different contexts, what languages did children want to use in the classroom? What languages were they officially meant to use, and what languages were used in practice? Shall I put Brian on the spot from the experience that you have in Lebanon?
Sure. So in Lebanon, the national curriculum of Lebanon is taught partly in Arabic, but you also have to study certain components of that curriculum are delivered and examined in either English or in French. So, for example, maths and science subjects are not the language of instruction and of examination in those subjects is not Arabic. It's either English or French, both of which were highly problematic for the incoming Syrian community, because there is no strong tradition of teaching of those languages, particularly in younger age groups in schools. So it meant that parents were not able to support their children with their learning when they were at home, but also there was no kind of broader accessible usage of English or French. It was English that these particular schools that were part of our research here that we're using. So English was a challenge, but it was one that the teachers themselves really tried to promote, particularly after the first few years of operation of those schools. So the schools moved from being in a modus operandi of we are here for a relatively short time. Let's keep the Syrian curriculum going because we're anticipating that we will be able to return home. As the years ticked on, the realization crept in that, of course, this was not going to happen imminently. It's still borderline miraculous in the view of many people that anyone's been able to return to Syria at all. But the director of MAPS phrased it very nicely. He said, we have to have two mindsets at the same time. We have to plan and do our work as though we're going to stay in Lebanon forever and as though we're going to go home tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a very powerful thought, isn't it? And now that a lot of Syrians from Lebanon have managed to return to Syria, and I had the opportunity to talk to the person that you're referring to very recently, and I reminded him of his slogan like 10 years ago, and he was still very proud of that idea that he had championed this, in a way that it basically talked about this unknowable future kind of situation through education. Vanessa, in the case of Cox's Bazar, would you like to comment on Ruth's question?
Right, yes. So in Cox's Bazar, it's quite messy. So basically, the teachers' demographics in Cox's Bazar is either teachers from the host community, Bangladeshi teachers, or Rohingya teachers. So in the classroom, the two different people from different backgrounds teaching a third language. Basically, the Myanmar national curriculum language is Burmese, taught by either Bangladeshi or Rohingya teachers. And usually both of them are not very proficient in Burmese language. One because Bangladeshi don't have any connection to Burmese, and then Rohingya who have been persecuted, and then they didn't have the access to the language. So it's a mixture of both. But then, not in this study, which I presented today, but in other studies we're conducted in Cox's Bazar, a lot of data sets tell that children love Burmese language. When we ask them the favorite subject, it's Burmese. I love Burmese. Parents also, which because they do have more, lived experiences is in the countries, the possessions and everything. So which makes sense. But even children, they do love Burmese. They say this is my favorite language. So the lot of historical, but as I said before, the aspiration to go back one day is quite strong among the community. So there's a hope associated with that language, and then never been accessing properly to that language for the first time through the official channel. They are given the opportunity. That's kind of the sense at the first stage. So it's been only 4 years. So that's now it's at the welcoming stage, very excited about it. So so children do love learning, but
Yeah.
at the same time in the classroom is very messy.
Thank you, Vanessa. Any other questions? Please feel free to raise your hand. Or if you would like to share any experience of your own sort of work or research that resonates with what has been just discussed.
Can I just jump back in, just picking up on a nuance in the question that I didn't address was MAPS was trying to use Syrian teachers as volunteers, and so the language challenges that the families had were also language challenges that the teachers had. So there's big implications there for the sense of belonging that the teachers had in the schools, in that science and maths teachers were expected to deliver the curriculum content in a language they themselves did not know. So there's multiple layers of challenge and complexity. So the question is asking about which languages did the children want to use. We also need to, I think, extend that question to which language do the teachers want to use and are dictated, or which languages are dictated that they have to use. And the practical reality was that people had a hybrid approach within their own capacities, but also with their own cultural preferences for not just conveying the content of the curriculum, but making sure that those children felt that they were able to understand and belong in that classroom. But all those questions and considerations, we mustn't lose sight of the fact that they also apply to the teachers as well.
So they're a very good point. And I think in the case of Cox's Bazar, it's it's fascinating to see that the country that has denied them the right to learn the language, the curriculum, is something that they desperately want to learn. Um, and even though they haven't been exposed to that kind of linguistic environment, and they speak Rohingya at home, but they want to learn in Burmese and they want to learn Burmese so that they could actually reconnect or return to the country which they are kind of originated from in their mind, even though it denies them. That it's a way of um, cultivating their sense of belonging, if you like, even if it is not their mother tongue. And that's why how powerful this idea of sense of belonging, developing this sense of belonging is so powerful that they would want to embrace the language that has actually been part of their persecution. Yeah, so the politics of language, isn't it? It's not just a means of instruction, it's embedded in all kinds of other ideas.
among the Syrian children at MAPS, they loved Arabic and they were very good at Arabic. Their Arabic was extremely high level compared to other countries that I've seen. They loved it. So that was part of their identity. They wanted to learn English very badly, but not because they wanted to integrate with the English curriculum in Lebanon as far as we could make out, but more that it would help them to do international things, possibly to move to another country, to get networks online. So that was a very different situation from that bizarre finding in Bangladesh. That's really interesting.
Thank you. Okay, so there's looks like another question. Okay, could you speak about how to navigate researcher bias in the implementation of methods?
Jitendra, we have a question in the audience. Did you see that? Greg has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, I
And
cannot see that,
there's no
unfortunately.
rush. We can go to the chat too. No problem.
Oh, okay. So let me take this question from a colleague called BH. Don't have the full name here. So could you, and then I'll come back to you, Greg. Okay. So could you speak about how to navigate researcher bias in the implementation of methods, as well as the social desirability of children's responses and participation in activities? Who would like to take up that question?
I can say a few words.
Yeah.
So the whole idea behind the methodology that I followed, or we followed in a way or another, in my research was collecting life histories. And life histories means establishing trust between the researcher and the children. And this trust does not start unless you have this mutual understanding of each other, knowing that we both had an experience of being displaced or forcibly displaced, knowing that we both originate, or I have at least lived in Syria for quite a very long time and taught in Syria and went to school in Syria, initiated this relationship of trust, if you will. And then bit by bit, I started by telling my own story and then sitting back and saying, well, what do you want to tell me? Tell me whatever you're thinking about, whatever you want to say. And then we start from there. They start selling whatever they're comfortable to tell. And a bit by bit, they share things that they have been reluctant to share at the beginning, maybe. Because I was working with teenagers in a way or another, drawing was out of the question. But little questionnaires or games or things like, what is your favorite song today? What did you listen to today? Why is that the song that you wanted to listen to today? What is your favorite show? What does it remind you of? Does it have any connotations to do with your own experience, etc.? These little things just started the conversation, but also built this relationship between myself and the participants.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zamana. Thank you. Greg?
Yeah, thanks so much. My name is Greg Teresvoudis. I live and work on the Thai-Myanmar border, so I'm on the other side of the Myanmar context, working with Karen and Karenni refugees on this side, and it's a very different picture on this side of the border. The Karen refugee camps, for example, they have their own homemade curriculum for their representing their Karen history and culture and language. And I would say there's very much an anti-Burmese sentiment. There's a lot of pushback for teaching Burmese in the schools, even though it does happen in some cases. And then in terms of like host country integration, up until just this year, it was illegal to teach Thai in any of the refugee camps. So Thailand really pushed very hard to ensure that, or to try and ensure refugees stayed in the camps, or that Thailand was just a transit country for them. So my question for the group is, in these contexts, what kind of autonomy do the refugees have in these kind of negotiations and decision making? How much is made by the government of the host country? How much is made by NGOs or things like this? I'd love to hear your insights in that negotiation space.
It's a very important question. Um, any reflections very quickly? We are running out of time from Lebanon or Cox's Bazar.
I mean, I can quickly say
Yeah, go ahead, Brian. Yes.
this is a very grey area because there are sometimes legal restrictions. Never mind the desires and wishes of the communities. So, for example, it is the case that I think I mentioned that these education centers were not allowed to be called schools because of the legal implications and curriculum oversight that comes with that. So even though in many ways they were offering the full Lebanese national curriculum because of how they were doing it to try and meet the kids where they were at, including with those language issues, there's a fudge. And I think when you scrape under the surface of lots of these small organizations, although notionally people are complying with curriculum requirements linked with the legal landscape, the actual lived reality is something very different.
No, thank you, Brian. Thanks very much for that response. I'm afraid we are up time. I know that, Yaspia, you have a question to Jumana. You might want to get in touch with Jumana to have further conversation, so we're just up time. Our next seminar will be on the 26th of May, if I'm remembering that correctly. But we will let you know anyway, which is when we will be presenting launching our special issue of Education and Conflict Review, which has actually put together rigorous reviews of promising educational policies, programs, and practices in conflict and protected crisis settings. So basically, we have just published a special issue which actually synthesizes research evidence looking at various types of educational interventions that have sort of promise in sort of addressing the kinds of difficulties in these settings. Please do search. We've shared through various means, but INE will be also sharing. And anyway, so we are launching that. We will be inviting several researchers and authors to share their work on the UCL ERIC seminar on the 26th of May. So thank you so much for coming to this event today. Thank you, Vanessa, Brian, Jumana, and Eleanor for wonderful presentations and sharing your research. We will continue to engage. And thank you, colleagues, for joining the UCL ERIC seminar. Thank you.
Thank you.